Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are the Owatonna School Board. This is Monday. It's the 25th of November, 5:30 p.m. I'm going to call our meeting to order. Ask Eric for our attendance.
Perfect attendance, all present.
We do indeed. Let's start our meeting with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up tonight would be to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
And a second. Any further discussion with regard to that? Hearing none. All in favor with an aye? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 4 tonight is Mission 1. I'm going to ask Mr. Elstead to take things from here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm going to ask our school patrol students if you wouldn't mind coming up here and kind of making a line, please, and thank you. As they're walking up, tonight for our mission moment, I'm honored to recognize our dedicated elementary school safety patrols. Representing them this evening are the 4 captains from each of our schools, along with their advisors. These outstanding 5th grade students play an important role in ensuring the well-being of their classmates, helping to create safer crossings for students walking to and from school each day, regardless of the weather, even when it's below zero. Before they begin, our safety patrol members go through traffic safety trainings, Throughout the year, they perform their duties and serve as role models for the younger students in their respective buildings. We also want to extend to the adult advisors who guide these students our thanks for providing the training, support, and encouragement. I would like each of you tonight, if I could have you make one about face to the board, and face the board if you would. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to go get that microphone and I'm going to pass it online because I want each of your names recognized tonight for the work that you do for our students. So I'm going to grab the microphone, excuse me. I'll sneak by you here. I'm going to start this way. And if you wouldn't mind just saying your name and the elementary school you attend. Okay, let's start down here.
Lucas.
What's your last name, Lucas?
Wallace.
And you go to?
Elementary, Wilson.
Wilson. Okay, great. Thank you.
Weston Craft, McKinley.
Okay.
Evelyn Griswold, and I go to Washington.
Ellie Dickerson, Washington.
Chloe Emberton, Washington.
Lainey Hall, Lincoln. Ellie Sorensen, Wilson.
Preston Kurtz, Lincoln.
Ellison Ginther, Lincoln.
Samantha Seifert, McKinley.
Zoe Norbeck, McKinley.
Madison Kahn, Wilson.
Eleanor Griswold, Washington.
Great. Let's get these outstanding students. I'm going to ask all of you to go out in the hallway, take a group photo, and you get a really cool and coveted hashtag Owatonna Proud sticker. So thank you.
All right. Thank you for all you guys do.
Thank you, guys.
I want to give Mr. Elstad a second to get back to his seat because in all of your years in education, don't you find it interesting that students that are school patrol find their way into like their elected positions in their respective classes, honor rolls, participation in extracurricular activities? There's a common thread there, isn't there? What did you say?
Superintendencies. I was a proud school patrol.
Ooh. All right.
Elementary in Faribault.
That is terrific. Thank you. We're going to move on to public forum. There are a couple of cards tonight. I have forgotten my sheet that admonishes or encourages everyone to please be respectful of the people that have something to say. And as you make your way up, the first card would be from Sarah Chandler. Ms. Chandler, please come on up. Glad you're here. 3 minutes to tell us the topic that you would like to speak on. And Sarah, were there any other cards beyond the 3? Okay. And if you'd like to have a seat right there and make sure that we're able to hear you with the microphone, that'd be terrific.
Okay.
Do I have to push it to, nope.
No, it's live, it's ready
All
to
right,
go.
thank you. My name is Sarah Chandler, and my daughter is a special ed student at the middle school. So she has been coming home quite distraught, and it's escalating, asking me to call the police because she is so upset and she keeps saying that she's being hurt. I have requested per the Owatonna School District's website to visit her classroom, and I have been denied. I was told it was against policy, which is not a true statement. I could read it to you, but I think you guys are all aware of your own policy. And so I am asking that my daughter is not discriminated against because she has special needs. I just want to, as a team, figure out what's going on. She has not been in school for the whole month of November because I went to send her the one day late, and we got to the doors of the school. She grabbed my hand and started crying and asked me to call the police. So it could be something that's really simple, but with her being nonverbal, we do not know. And so I am just wanting the right that every parent has in this district, just to make sure that we can come up as a plan as parents and the staff to make sure our daughter's safe and can have an education that every student should be able to have.
Ms. Chandler, thank you. A card from Jeff Chandler. Mr. Chandler, please come on up.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Chandler. I'm the father of Isabella Chandler. And it is concerning to me as a parent, that our daughter, isn't able to express, what it is she's experiencing at school. And so, I advocate, I'm here to have advocation towards being able to visit a room for a couple of hours. Not myself, my wife can do that, but I'm just here to advocate that and just ask that you would please consider that right. And I know there's policies out there in the Minnesota Board of Education that allow that, but then there's other policies that speak to special education. So, but in this case, being that she's nonverbal, we would really appreciate if you would consider our request. Thank you.
Mr. Chandler, thank you. Last card is April St. Martin. Ms. St. Martin, welcome.
Hi. First of all, I would like to congratulate Tim and Ron and Andrea for running again and winning this for our school board again. Unlike Mrs. Chandler back there, I'm going to actually read you what the policy says, just so it's on record so everybody knows. The purpose of the policy is to make rules and procedures governing visits to district property and district facilities. This is in number 903, visitors to the school district buildings and sites. The school board encourages interest on the part of parents and community members in school programs and student activities. The school board welcomes visits to the buildings and school property by parents and community members, provided the visits are consistent with the health, education, and the safety of the students and employees. The school board recognizes that reasonable restrictions must be placed on visits to the district facilities in order to maintain an environment that is safe and conducive to the learning and working environment. Definitions, there's a whole bunch in here, but the procedures, and it says visitor procedures. Number 3 says that parents who wish to observe their children in the classroom during the regular school day must schedule the visit in advance with the classroom teacher or the building principal or designee. Nowhere does it say that it is in best practices that you deny a parent the right to observe their child in the classroom. It is in your policy, and we are asking and requesting that the school board answers their emails and finds a way for her to observe her student when she has a concern about what is going on in the classroom. I, as a community member, am asking you to just follow the procedures that you have already put into place. I know for a fact she has contacted many of you that are even just sitting here, and she is still feeling like there is no answer to be had. So she has and is currently keeping her student out of the school district that you so claim to love and cherish. And I am just asking once again, on behalf of the Chandler family, to just follow your own policies. Thank you.
Ms. St. Martin, thank you very much.
I'm so sorry. Can I just add that I do have a note from her doctor, her ophthalmologist, too, requesting that it would be very good for us to be able to visit.
Duly noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, as we move on, item 6 tonight would be reports. And our first and only report would be the financial forecast. It's with Lori Voles. And I'll ask Mr. Elstad to join her and introduce this presentation.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Lori and I are going to approach this together tonight and present to you kind of the financial forecast for the district and walk through what I believe are some key tenets or challenges that are facing the district financially. So I'm going to turn it over to Lori, and then I'll interject along the way if that's okay. So I'll go ahead and advance the slides here.
Okay, to summarize, there are 4 key financial challenges that are facing the Owatonna Public Schools. First and foremost, I would say the largest driver of the financial challenge is the expiration of the federal ESSER grants. ESSER grants came to the district during the pandemic from the federal government, and we have come to the expiration of those grants. And so in this current fiscal year, we have seen a reduction of federal aid then. It has dropped by $3 million. So that's a big driver of a financial challenge. With those funds, for example, when the grant was written, it was for retaining 10 existing positions for what was called continuity of operations. And so just to emphasize, positions that were funded with the grant was more than 10 positions, but that we retain the positions, but the funding has gone away. So of course that brings an imbalance to the bottom line of the financials. Another.
Can I ask a clarifying question quick? Because when we went over this in policy, finance committee, and Elizabeth and Lori helped me out, the way you articulated this money was very clarifying that it wasn't everybody got this money from COVID and the government. You had to do what? And then can you talk just very briefly about what other districts did with it?
Yeah.
Just as a comparative?
I think I'll speak to that. So there was really no strategy provided with this additional money, and so districts were kind of left to how they wanted to spend it. And many districts around us chose the approach of maybe going out and hiring a bunch of new staff and things like that. We chose a more metered strategy, which was we recognized that the funding was, it's lived as grant funding, and so you sort of live and die by grant funding. And so we chose the metered approach of really spreading this out over time so that we wouldn't have to go to our taxpayers any sooner than we have to for additional operating expense levy. And so again, we stretched it out for as long as we could, and that was our strategy. I think it turned out to be an effective strategy because it delayed any potential ask of our community for operating expenses. Okay. Moving forward, that may present itself, but that was our strategy, and I feel like that was the right thing to do. We did add a few more staff along the way, but it wasn't in a big proportion.
Maybe, Jolene, if I might, was there a phrase like continuity of services or something to that extent that really explained and was the primary parameter around which we could spend that money? And so we just used it, I think, wisely and, maintained what we had instead of adding a lot of bells and whistles that would have to go away one day.
And I would just want to give credit to both Amanda Hauman, our former Director of Finance, and Lori, our current Director of Finance, that provided that sort of guidance about continuing our programs without having to make major reductions, but also not adding a bunch of staff that we knew we were going to end up reducing in the long run anyway.
Thank you.
Another category is our special ed expenditures greatly increased over the last 5 years, and we have a graph in a minute that will dive into that a little bit deeper. But that's also brought some financial challenges. And the reason I want to point that out is that with our special ed expenditures, we don't get a reimbursement from the state of Minnesota to cover all of our expenses for special ed. And so therefore it brings an extra burden on the general fund. Another point is...
Lori, can I ask you one quick question? If you're going to present additional information to help support that, does that information also reflect there was a meaningful increase from the state as it relates to special ed funding? There's always been a gap. There's always been a noticeable gap between the expectations of the services that would be delivered and the funding to provide that. Will this chart speak to that as well?
Well, we speak more to the expenditure side, but what you were referring to was the improvement of the special ed aid formula.
Yes.
And that did happen in the last biennium. However, we still have a gap, like you mentioned. The revenues, even with that revenue improvement from the state of Minnesota,
there was still a gap.
Does not cover all the costs, so it's still a big burden.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, number 4, enrollment. The good news.
3 was contract settlements, just as and there'll be a graph later to demonstrate that as well.
Yeah. Enrollment has been steady over the last 10 years, but is projected to decline in the next 5 years. So that's another pressure point for us. Okay, to the general fund federal revenue. This just helps illustrate what's happened through the pandemic. So besides federal ESSER dollars, the district historically also receives some federal funds in the general fund for like our title programs, for example, and federal special ed. However, during the pandemic years, we receive additional funding of federal funds for what's called ESSER grants. And you can see in the FY24, right there, the $5.6 million, that's our actual revenues that we received that was all federal funds in our general fund. And those grants have now expired and dropped off. And so that is just illustrating this drop of $3 million of decline of federal aid. Okay, now going on to special ed. This helps illustrate why our special ed costs have gone up. It's because our special ed child count has gone up over the last 10 years. Going back to the 14-15 year of 668 students of our special ed child count, this unduplicated child count, up to our current year is at 1,001. So that is a substantial increase in special ed count, and it reflects additional needs our students have in our student body.
I'll just interject and add too that I think, recognizing over the last 30 years that I've been in education, just seeing the needs that students present themselves with requires additional services. And so that's why, and there's probably many reasons why that exists. But nonetheless, the students that come through our doors that require our support are going to get that support. And so we have more students that are now qualifying for IEPs. So.
Okay, this illustrates the actual expenses over a 10-year period. You can see literally it going from 9.9 million up to 17.4 million, which is a drastic increase in costs. And as was indicated earlier, that even though we've had improvement in the special ed aid revenue stream, it is not enough to cover that excess or additional expenditure costs of special ed. And therefore it is, I'll say, brings an extra burden on the general fund because the general funds then have to fill the gap.
And these special ed programs are mandated either by federal law or state law?
Federal law.
Federal law, okay.
Yep.
Okay, now going to the point of our settlements and also just how our salary and benefits costs have increased over a 10-year period. This is just general fund. And it does reflect a couple things. It does speak to the fact that how much, and we'll get to this in a minute, we have had a growth in the number of positions we've had in the district over 10 years. But it also speaks to, if you look at between the 23 and 24, you see kind of a bump up there. So we had a couple things coming into play there. We did increase staffing there. We expanded our online program, which, by the way, is a great a revenue stream for our district, and it is it brings in more revenue than our expense. So it helps our bottom line. It's a very important program. We expanded it because we saw a need, but it's also of a great benefit to our overall revenues for the general fund.
If I might add and put a little more context to that, so our Owatonna online program as it sits right now is generating about a net of $1 million for our school district, and that just comes through open enrollments and other tuition agreements that we have, because all of those students attending our programs as open enrollees, we retrieve their funding from their respective districts because they're now attending an Owatonna program. So you'll see that little bump there, but that was due in part to hiring some additional Owatonna online staff to accommodate that.
Okay, so now looking at our staff counts over a 10-year period, one piece that is an important data set to recognize is that we have increased our staffing by 47 over 10 years. And just as a side note, regarding the ESSO grants, we had, as I mentioned earlier, we have 10 instructional staff that we retained with the grant rather than making cuts as we entered into the pandemic. But then we also added 12 new staff that were also covered by the ESSER grant, and we've retained all those positions as well that were part of that ESSER grant. But then, obviously, over that period of time of 10 years, there were more adds than just due to the ESSER grant.
I'll just add, again, a little more context to that. So the 47 positions you're seeing also reflected here are the Owatonna online positions that we just mentioned. The other thing is you just saw a few slides ago the raise in special education expenditures. That's a result of having to have more staff available for students, support staff, behavior interventionists, things like that. And of course, that drives the staffing number up.
And so the 47, what percentage are admin, what percentage is direct student contact?
There weren't any additional administrative positions.
Okay, so those 47 positions were direct student contact?
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this talks to what our student counts have been over the years. Again, the numbers illustrated here is what's called average daily membership. So this is the stat that we actually get funded on from the state of Minnesota through the gen ed revenue. And so you will see that it's been, the good news is we've been very steady over a 10-year period. Most districts have seen a decline over 10 years. We've been very fortunate that we've been quite steady. And again, this is the account that we're funded on. So like, for example, preschool students, we just get funded on a fraction of their ADM, and that's why these numbers come in as they are. We also have, I just want to make a note that the tuition students from Northfield last year was also Albert Lee, and our third one was
Moorhead.
Moorhead is this year.
No.
Anyway, yes, we have, those are our tuition students, so we do not receive gen ed revenue from those, so it's a little bit unique nuance with those particular students that are tuitioned.
And when we do a tuition agreement, just for clarity, they are able to stay in their home community. So we have students that are accessing Owatonna online academic programming, but they might be staying. So students today at Northfield High School can still access their activities. They can access their sort of fine arts and other extracurricular activities if they so choose. But their academic pieces are coming through Owatonna Online. So we bill them for those services at a reduced rate because the home district still retains a portion of that funding because they still are enrolled in some of their district programs as well.
Okay, this graph just is another way of illustrating what's happened in the past and what we're looking at in the future. I want to emphasize this graph is K-12, so it does not include the pre-K students that we serve. Again, this is reflecting average daily membership of which we get funded on. You can see we've been quite steady over going back to 18-19 up to the 23-24 year. 24-25 is showing at 4,667. Just want to point out we continue to see slight improvements on this initial estimate. But then looking to the future, we do see it dropping down some. And there's a couple reasons why. A lot of it is our kindergarten counts that we anticipate to be coming to us in the future.
I do want to point out something I think that's interesting. So if you look at the last 3 school years leading up to this year, we have continually outperformed what the trend line or what demographers had been saying about our projected enrollment. The other part about this graph I think that's important to mention is that really anything beyond the 27-28 school year is speculation. Because again, in a community our size, major shifts in business can have a huge impact on the enrollment that we see. And so I just wanted to point out a couple of different items about this particular graph. And again, as Lori indicated, in this year's bar, we're even seeing a little bit more than the 4667 since this report was generated. We've seen a little improvement there as well.
That's correct. Yep, I monitor it constantly. So, so this gives us an idea of what our kindergarten counts have done in the past. So if you look back in 18-19, you can see it was more than 350 kindergarten students, and these are actual counts up through the 23-24 year, which we just concluded. And so you can visually see where we've been, that we have declined from a little over 350, and now we're below 300. So that is very impactful because we're funded on the number of students that we serve. Just to give you a general idea, our gen ed funding formula is about $11,000 per pupil. So when we have a drop of 100 kids, it really adds up fast financially and how that impacts the bottom line. This graph, I know there's a lot of data, but it helps illustrate what's happening when our kindergarten counts are dropping. So if you kind of look in the middle of the chart towards the top line says K minus 12 minus K. So what this means is our incoming kindergarten compared to the graduating class of the prior year. So the 25-26 year, that is a negative number, 154. And so that is really a driver of why enrollment projection shows a decrease, is that the incoming kindergartners are at a much lower class size than our graduating seniors. Now, we do have another nuance here that's shown in the graph. If you look at grade 9, you can see a positive number. It's in the 50s, 56, 52. That is reflective of the students coming from St. Mary's as they enter into 9th grade. And so that's why we see that bump consistently from year to year. Okay, so here's an update on the financial forecast. I know there's a lot of numbers here. I'm just going to kind of hit the highlights. So this financial forecast, I have some assumptions in it because that's what a forecast is. So I'm running with the assumption of, number one, the enrollment forecast that I just showed you. Also running with the assumption on the basic gen ed formula that we will receive a 2.5% increase on that basic formula. The special ed formula, the actual formula as it exists, how it calculates is reflected in these numbers. And that's basically it. I'm not assuming any other legislative changes in the next biennium. And then on the expenditure side, this illustrates a reduction. We're making cost reductions of $1.7 million for next fiscal year. So that would be for FY26. And then also we have assumptions of what inflationary costs we will anticipate to have with our staff, et cetera. And so with making cost reductions of 1.7 million, we go from this current year, we're deficit spending at 2.5 million. And even with making cuts, it's a reduction of 275,000. You see at the bottom there in the yellow. So that is what I'm projecting our general fund will be. Now, again, this is our grand total general fund with all the reserves and everything. I'll get to the unassigned fund balance in a second. But even with making these reductions, coming pretty close to balancing our budget, because you can see we have a substantial a budget here, that we come close to breaking even. And then the concern is, look at the next year, FY27. So it doesn't solve our problems, because the state of Minnesota, if all they can do in improving our formulas is 2.5% on the basic formula, it's not enough money to cover our inflationary costs going forward. And so that is the concern. So now to address the question, well, how does our unassigned general fund balance? So in our general fund, we have a variety of reserves, like reserve for operating capital, reserve for long-term facility maintenance. Then the big bucket of that general fund that's called unassigned is where our main operations are. So I'm projecting that unassigned fund balance, even with making cuts in FY26, we'd be going from about a 12.89% unassigned fund balance down to 12.26 approximately. And then FY27, we're deficit spending. We're spending it down to about 10%, and after that, we're just spending it down. When you're deficit spending, it compounds on itself year after year. So this just to give you some clarity, yes, making cuts for next year definitely helps for next year, but we still have challenges going forward.
One thing that I want to point out to you that's just below that unassigned fund balance percentage is the number of months that we could expense with that unassigned fund balance. So if you look at even the 2025 budget at 12.89 of unassigned, with a seems like a larger amount, is about a month and a half of operation. So again, you can see how that's impacted down to the point where when you get into this area right here, it's called statutory operating debt. So again, I think these numbers point out to you that we've been conservative with where we're at, but without any additional revenue streams coming in, it will pose quite a financial challenge for us moving forward. At this point, we would entertain any other questions that the board members might have.
This is a consistent situation that multiple school districts are in, right? Like this is not unique to Owatonna right now at this stage.
That's a good point. This is certainly not isolated to Owatonna. So there are approximately 338 public school districts in the state of Minnesota. At last count, nearly 260 or 270 of them are in the same financial spot. I was just watching a news story this morning, and again, this is a matter of scale. The Anoka-Hennepin School Board tonight is meeting to discuss making $20 million in reductions. And again, their budget, largest school district in the state, so everything is scaled, but they're facing the same challenges certainly that we are, and many other districts around us. So, and the enrollment trends that you're seeing, again, plays itself out, not just in Minnesota, but across the nation. That there's just lower birth rates, and so that's paying into seeing kindergarten numbers drop.
So one point I'd also want to make, going back to our enrollment, there's a couple things. With our online program, we've seen an increase of overall enrollment into our district. Some of those open enrollments are into the online program, but there are open enrollments at every level. And even, I think the new high school has drawn some attraction for open enrollments that are coming in person as well. And so that open enrollment trend has been very positive for us. We are bringing in more students that are going out. So this is reflecting that positive news per se, but it's that lower kindergarten class that's coming in that is really causing a lot of trouble.
One thing I just always like to refer back to was from the spring. It was this referendum vote area Big 9, where it's just showing that Owatonna spends $529 per pupil unit, which is just above the lowest, and which is $512 in Austin, all the way up to Northfield, which is at $2,064 per pupil unit. So I think that's just a good representation that it looks good.
Right. And the other part, again, I know that it's premature to indicate what strategy might be most appropriate here. Increasing operating expenses through a levy is one potential solution that you will be poised to discuss at a later date. But it's a good remark, Elizabeth, because I think that in comparison to other Big 9 schools, we are near the bottom, one up from the bottom, actually. And I also think that there have been some most recent referenda that have been passed in the Big 9 that have even stretched that and made the gap even further. The other part about referendum that's an interesting thing is that I've often thought that there's another piece of this, which is equalization, which you hear me talk about quite frequently. The zip code of where you reside in Minnesota should not decide how much our taxpayers have to put in. And again, the case can be made that Owatonna taxpayers, because of our particular economy here, are paying more than if you lived in Rochester or some other district, even in our Big 9 conference. So,
Any other questions?
Maybe just one more comment. I think the other topic we discussed in our finance committee meeting that might be worth noting is just plain inflation, right? I mean, we've all heard it. We hear it in the news. We experience it personally. And the fact is, our school district has experienced it as well. So I think that's just one more piece of the puzzle in the numbers. So,
yeah, all of their vendor contracts have seen increases that are just inflationary increases that the market is bearing. And with that, but the problem is we don't have any. The revenue coming in doesn't match what those inflationary increases have been, and the gap just continues to widen.
Anybody else? Okay, hearing none. Thank you both very much. Item 7 tonight is just the general information, and specifically it would include the enrollment report that was a part of your board packet. Any of you have any questions relative to the enrollment report?
Red, still looks good.
Red. Okay, we're going to move on. Item 8 tonight would just be discussion items, starting with the board forum. And if we can kind of go around the room, committee meeting reports. Lori, you want to start with committee reports?
yeah, I think they're all published in your agenda there. I apologize. I think I lost connectivity here. But obviously the finance committee and the policy committees, we've been busy meeting regularly. The presentation you saw was part of our last finance committee meeting. And a couple of things on the agenda tonight related to first and then second reading for policy. So,
Deborah.
Are we doing committee reports now?
Yes.
Facilities Committee met today and discussed the sale of the
Bridge Street
School, and we've made a decision that will be presented on December 9th to the board.
I'm just on the policy committee. We've been trying to get through lots of policies in the last couple of months.
Nothing.
I was also at the facility. Have nothing more to add.
Same here, and I think Deborah covered perfect.
I just want to say I enjoyed our visit this morning at the Area Learning Center with Martina Wagner.
Yeah.
It was a great visit.
Mock trial has auditions tomorrow, which is a first-time event for us. So we're excited to get our roster together of what our team is going to look like this year.
Good evening, school board members and community members. This week, our students demonstrated remarkable generosity during Huskies Give Week. The Student Council and other student groups, such as Shock, collected nearly 600 cereal boxes, 250 toys, and over 200 clothing items to support those in need. All of these donations were made to Community Pathways. As of right now, winter sports are underway with basketball among the activities. And tonight, OHS Huskies and Varsity Choir and Varsity Orchestra has a concert.
Aaron, Ayub, thank you. Anybody have any comments relative to the work session that we had with?
I just thought it was really enlightening. It was great, really good discussion. So look forward to repeating those opportunities.
Same would be true of the data retreat. I thought that was excellent.
Yeah.
The last item tonight, item 4, would be the policy revisions. Anybody have any questions after the first quick read on those policy revisions for the policy committee?
I have a comment. Under the harassment and violence, the addresses for the people to contact needs to be updated because they're not at Bridge Street anymore.
Thank you.
Duly noted. Thank you. Elizabeth, you.
Yeah. Can I just clarify a couple points on the 522 Title IX? Just some things that I just wanted to make sure I understood it. Let's see. So just Roman numeral 1. Letter H. So it says, nothing in Title IX or its regulations may be read in derogation of any legal right of parent, guardian, or other authorized legal representative to act on behalf. Can you just clarify for me what that means?
Like me to take that on? I don't know, I'm gonna ask Chris too if she'd be willing to step up too, because she reviews policies.
I'm just not sure if it means, yeah.
My interpretation of that particular piece would mean that there can be nothing that's read in derogatory terms regarding the complainant, respondent, or other persons that's within a Title IX complaint.
Yep.
That's my understanding of it. Chris, do you want to see that?
Which paragraph were you looking at, Elizabeth?
H.
H, yeah, under.
On the general, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, well, I'll just throw out my 2 cents. I think it really just means that, parents or whomever, they retain the rights that they have within that role. But this policy doesn't in any way, that's how I interpret it, yeah.
Okay.
That they maintain their rights. This policy doesn't supersede theirs. Yep.
Okay, got it. And the way I understood it too is that basically Title IX takes precedence over any other organization, local law, rules, things like
Federal.
that.
It's
correct?
federal, that's right. It preempts everything
Yep.
below it.
Okay, okay.
However, state law could narrow that.
Oh,
Could narrow it.
okay, okay. And then, let's see, so Roman numeral 1, I, just under H. Okay, it's a little bit confusing. I'll just read it. In the limited circumstances in which Title IX or its regulations permits different treatment or separation on the basis of sex, the school district must not carry out such different treatment or separation in a manner that discriminates on the basis of sex by subjecting the person to more than de minimis harm. So basically saying that there might be a circumstance where Title IX permits different treatment or separation, but the school district cannot carry out if it discriminates on the basis of sex.
Whatever that federal code is. Overrules
I don't know, Chris, if you want to comment. I think that de minimis phrase really is just saying you can, if there are minimal inconveniences or minor, differences, those are permitted. They have to be, that's what de minimis, right? Minimal.
Sure.
Something small.
Yep.
But otherwise you can't. Is that how
Yeah,
you?
the focus really is on educational programs or activities. I don't have an example of what a de minimis I have.
Yeah.
To get
All right.
That wouldn't be a full list.
Okay. And then just the last sentence in that same letter I, it says, adopting a policy or engaging in a practice that prevents a person from participating in an education program or activity consistent with the person's gender identity subjects a person to more than de minimis harm on the basis of sex. So I do wonder, though, how, if this is the way, well, one, I think it's arguable that this is true federal interpretation, being that the last I read that Congress did not authorize anything other than the original Title IX law in 1972. However, if this is the way we're going to state it, I just think it'd be nice. We need to also consider the other students that might consider themselves in harm's way if this is allowed. So if, at what point do you consider discrimination versus safety? And our goal is to protect all students. So anyway, just a thought, like how are we going to protect the students that would feel unsafe in a situation? That's all I got.
Well, it's a first reading. I guess I would just say, this is our first reading, something to consider.
I would add one thing. This particular interpretation has been on the state law for a while, and has actually outpaced the federal law. The federal law simply matches what the state of Minnesota has had in statute for at least a couple of years, if not more. So,
and I guess I'm just curious too, is this something that we use our, the district's law firm to do? Like, do we run policy by them in certain circumstances like this, or not necessarily?
we utilize the services of the Minnesota School Board Association. In fact, their attorneys are the ones that review this before they make particular edits or revisions to any policies that are proposed.
Runs a lot of these policies through the school law firms in Minnesota, including one of ours. So it's already basically.
Sure. Okay.
Anybody with any other questions relative to policy revisions? Okay. Item B would be the administrative report. Mr. Elstad, anything to add with regard to administrative
report? Yes, I just have a couple items tonight for you. First one is, and I think this has already been brought forward, the Bridge Street Realtor proposals. There'll be a proposal and recommendation prepared for you for the December 9th meeting for your consideration. December 9th also marks our district audit and truth and taxation hearing. So just to make a note of that, and we'll be right here again back at the Crandall Center. January 15th through the 17th is the annual leadership conference for the Minnesota School Board Association. We have a few people that have signed up to be part of that. I know that Mr. Kubitschek and Ms. Van Gelder are part of that as well as new incoming members that will be seated on January 6th, just before the conference. So we're happy they're able to take advantage of that. It appears there's a number of really good sessions. I will say that Chris Pica and I and Dr. Preisler from MSU Mankato, Abigail Sutcliffe, who's one of our apprenticeship program students, and Lauren Simon, who is a journey worker within that same program, are doing a presentation on Thursday afternoon regarding our apprenticeship program here. So showcasing that for other boards and administrators to take part in. And the last is, it's Thanksgiving week, and I'm very thankful to serve as a community servant, but also serving with this board. And I appreciate your leadership and thankful for the leadership and guidance that you provide me as a superintendent. So thank you.
Okay. With that, we're going to move on. Item 9 tonight is the consent agenda. My quick reminder is that we are approving the minutes from October 28th and November 12th meetings, the disbursement, and the personnel report. Does anybody have a reason to pull any of these out to be voted on independently? Okay, hearing none, would one of you please entertain a motion or introduce the motion?
I move that the board approve the consent agenda.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Eric, if you would, please.
Yep. Elizabeth?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Deborah?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Jelaine?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I myself is an aye. 7-0 pass.
Motion carries. Item 10 tonight, a couple of items that require board action, the first of which is the policy revisions, item A. As we dive into this, there was one in particular that had really quite a number of changes, mostly additions, and it was it student medication? I think it was student medication. There were a lot of changes in that one. And were those mostly just in keeping with shared understandings of how medications can and would be dispensed
Yes.
through the school
Yep.
system?
Yes.
Okay. Beyond that, I didn't really have any other questions. I would open up. Does anybody have any questions relative to the policy revisions as they are being presented? Hearing none. Jelaine, you don't have.
I don't.
Eric, do you have it up?
Sure. I've got it. Let's see. Oh, let's see. I can just do it.
Would you?
I move that we adopt the policies as shown in the agenda tonight.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor with an aye? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Item B tonight would be gifts to the district. Once again, Owatonna is an incredibly generous community. Mr. Elstead, anything to comment with regard to gifts?
I often look at some of the gifts that are given and all of the things that you don't think are, everything from supplies for our dance team to jerseys and shorts for the basketball, for workplace giving, adaptive bikes, and even funding to help reimburse for the rental of portable restrooms, because they all cost money. But I appreciate the fact that we continue, our business community and our other nonprofits lean into these concerns and help us as a district and as our students move these items forward. So I'm grateful for that as well.
Excellent. Would one of you please introduce the motion regarding gifts?
I move that the board approve the resolution for acceptance of gifts as presented.
Second.
Motion. Any further discussion? Eric, if you would.
Yep. Elizabeth?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Deborah?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Jelaine?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I myself is an aye. 7-0 pass.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Yeah. Before we adjourn, I want to thank Lori Voles and Jeff Elstad for the presentation as it relates to this upcoming decision-making that the board has in front of us. We have an obligation not only to be very respectful of where we are, but we need to act prudently as it relates to what appear to be systemic changes with regard to student population in our district. And it's going to take some careful time, listening, and conversation here at the board level as it relates to that. With that, I'll make the motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor with an aye? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Good meeting. Thanks, folks.